I want to speak something that I think is a huge need across Toronto and Chicago, and it is basically the need for replication. And I think it is such a thing that everyone says, but not everyone does, and it's hard to do, and we're going to talk through it today. So I want to talk about, the title of my subject today is The Value is Leadership. The value is leadership. Your value, the value, it is leadership. I get it, man. I don't know if everyone's ever heard, but you have to have, otherwise you're living under a rock. The different sayings, like if you want something done well, finish it. Do it yourself. And there's things like, it's hard to find good help, and man, is there anybody that will care about this as much as I care about this? And all these sayings, they're true, but they're the product of poor leadership, and they're the actual prevailers of a lack of leadership, because what we tend to do is do it ourselves if we want it done right. The problem with that is, the more you do it yourself, the more you're going to do it yourself. And the real necessity and the real value prop for anybody in any setting is that you are a leadership developer. But I think that there are some struggles with that, and I've observed where people just struggle with that. And so I want to speak to that. I want to allow plenty of time for questions, because this is one of those where it's not just take ideals. The gap between any leadership principle is one, your alignment to it, and secondly, your ability to enact it. And that takes skills. It takes hard skills of communication. It takes hard skills of listening, hard skills of making a next steps plan, hard skills of being able to discern where people are at. Discernment is a gift that a leader should never overlook or seek to, or be slow to seek out. Like your ability to be right on the money with where someone's at, that's huge. And so I want to talk about it because I think we need more of it. We need to continue to raise people and create leaders. That is our goal. Well, not our only goal as a church, but here's another thing I want to bring on this subject. I said this in Toronto this week, but there seems to be a confusion quite often between the value of leadership and the priority of discipleship. No one is saying here, again, this is why I believe church should be done 7 days of the week. If you want to achieve everything a church is called to do, and you only show up once to one thing, you're going to be left thinking that your church isn't doing anything. Obviously, our mandate is what? To make fully. We get it, right? We all understand it. We're with it. Is it the main thing? Bam. Yes. Is it the only thing? No. I've seen some very passionate believers who know their word, have very small teams, kill churches, and really take vision nowhere. Why? Well, obviously there is a spiritual gift of leadership. And what are we doing? What are we in the practice of doing? Like, what is staff meeting about at People Church? Oh, it's about those that are called to ministry and do what? Lead. So the reason we contextually speak about it is because it is a spiritual gift. We are talking to the subset of humans in this church that are charged with that gift and office. And that's why we speak to it. Does it mean that the discipleship is not important? No. Is discipleship the only thing? It is not the only thing. Because if it was, that would mean that people that know their word well know how to lead teams well. I know some really versed theologians that could never lead a meeting out of a paper bag. Like it is impossible for them. Why? Because it is a spiritual gift. It is a leadership need. And we see that in two great cases in two separate testaments. In the Old Testament, Moses is challenged by his father-in-law, which now that I have a father-in-law, I'm sure he loved it. You know what I mean? He was like, ah. In fact, actually, they had a good relationship. It seems that he greeted him with an embrace, and he lived with him in the wilderness and found him in a very interesting point of his life, we know. But what did his father-in-law say? What you're doing is not good. It's going to kill you, and it's going to kill the people. I think often the thing that kills a lot of our faith on this journey of building the kingdom and church is that we're not good at what we do. And we love God and we love people, man, and we want to give them the gospel, but we are so bad at creating and navigating the tension points of community and the mass that goes with that. And so we need to talk about it. It's not an exclusion of discipleship. It is the fact that some of us are called within the house of God with the function of leadership. And some of us are called within the house of the kingdom, which is outside the house of God, but in the workplace and charged with leadership. And I think one of the best ways to spread the gospel, if you are a leader, is to be a good one.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, humanity will usually chalk up bad leadership to bad intent, not incompetency. And therefore it becomes personal. And then all of a sudden, oh, you're that Christian, but you're making me work overtime. You're that Christian, you don't even know how to look after me. You haven't even had a good communication kind of conversation with me. Like, well, the reality is we need good leadership. And leadership is also expressed in the distribution of food to the Hellenic widows. And you see it there as well. And it's a great, better model for biblical leadership. Why? They both needed to be filled with the Holy Spirit, have a good reputation, but they needed to be gifted for it. So if you're going to actually have things flourish under you, around you, and even over you, because your leadership affects the people over you. Good leadership goes up the chain and down the chain. Good leadership actually is a blessing, a gift, and a contributor to people that are over you, not simply a function of those that are below you. That is an abdication of the full role of leadership. And so therefore, that being the case, I want to dive into some just a few principles that I think make you a better leader. And the first thing I'm going to do is the most sobering of these measures, which is basically this one. And it is, number one, measure your release. The first thing with it, I want to pull apart the word measure. Not enough leaders look into the mirror of measure. We are under the pretense that because we're gifted speakers and we got mantras, or because we can point out problems, that we're good leaders. The truth is that leadership needs measure. And the measure is your release. How many people have you released into leadership? How many people have you released that have released people into leadership? Because that means they know what they're doing. And if I guarantee you that most of us will think leadership is busyness. Well, let's just be real busy, man, meeting with some people. Man, I'm real busy, man. I'm busy. I'm writing problems down. I'm real busy. That doesn't make you a good leader. It makes you Captain Obvious. The reality is, where is the release of my leadership? And how do I measure that? How many people have been released to their calling? How many people are released into their gifting? You know that an insecure leader will often, rather than release gifting, observe gifting and shut down gifting or try to emulate gifting. For example, let's say I've got Maddie and she's just super gifted at like task, let's say, right? Or let's actually use someone that is really gifted at task. And let's go with, she's like, that is a far-fetched analogy. Yeah, Maddie raises her hand. Can we use a real example that would be easier to learn from? Let's use Brittany Neighbor, right? If like, I see her and she's brilliant at task. If I'm an insecure leader, rather than release her to it, I will try beat her at it. And I'll try be a better task warrior than be an actual releaser to it. Which means, not only am I insecure, I have a poor definition of what leadership is. I think leadership is being the best, not raising the best. My goal then, and how we could all understand, is how is our measure of leadership? And here's the other thing. You cannot live from the trophy cabinet of leadership. Man, there was a season, man, I had 12 leaders come out. And those 12 leaders, I can still name them. That's cool, but that was 12 years ago. Or that was 12 months ago. What are you releasing now? Being a once good leader is all that you then were, a once good leader. But I've never seen anybody stay in the NFL because they were once a good quarterback. Do you know what I mean? You're only as good as your last play. You're only as good as your last game or your last season. Hey, we have down seasons. That's okay. But are you a leadership machine? Are you releasing people? Have you stopped to look in the measure of, the mirror of measure? Because I think if a lot of leaders did that, you'd be a little bit more sober. And I want to also come against one of the greatest lies when it comes to the measure of release is this: if I had, I would. Man, if I had more money, if I had more time, if I had more leaders, cool. If I had more height, I'd be in the NBA. You know, if I had more muscles, if I had more money, if I had more time, I'd be ahead of many. There was a stupid thing on social media where this guy goes, you know, everyone thinks that a day needs 24 hours. I divide my day into sixes, and he starts saying how he has so many days. You stack that up over a week, he kicks everybody's butt. I'm like, that's crazy, you know, because I divide my day into seconds. I've already had 60 days in the last minute, you know, like so stupid. But anyway, like I think quite often there's this idea that if we had more, we'd be more. A good leader is about what you have and how you make it do more. That's good leadership. So in this place, like we got to ask ourselves, all right, how do I leverage what I have to get what I need? The complexity, I think, that every leader faces is not just decision fatigue, but decision quality. What is the quality of the decisions you make that is going to leverage what you have to get to where you need to go? Measure not just the release, but measure the quality of your decisions, and you'll start to increase the release of your leadership. Are there people doing what you should do? Are there people doing what you can only do in some ways as far as gifting wise? And are there people doing what you can't get to? Why did I start off with this thing, if you want good help, you know, or if you want it done right, do it yourself? Is because impatience will make you do the work because you are afraid to let the work drop. And if you will not let the work drop, you will not allow leaders to stand. Because if anyone's going to be good, they got to get room to be bad. They have to have room to be bad at what they do if they're ever going to be good at what they do. And the greatest thing you could do when leading up the chain is communicate expected collateral and know that it's planned and within your field of view. If it is within your field of view and it is communicated, it will never come across as a surprise, and you will look like you are still in control and that there is an actual strategic plan to your measure of release. Just know this though, if you're too afraid for it to drop, you'll carry it forever.
That's good.
So the other thing you've got to release is this. You've got to be really good at releasing people to the vision and seeing the portions of vision that they feel passionate and able to. If you have not in your team, you're not recruiting. It's not recruiting. Oh, but you know, there was a day and age that, you know, creative was like the standing rhetoric of every leader who failed was this: it's too skilled. It's too skilled. And leaders are they can't do it. It's too skilled, man. They want to get paid for it. You know, creatives, they're so emotional. Okay, cool. Maybe that is the case. But Maddie did it. Is Maddie lucky? That's what most people that aren't achieving in leadership would say of people in leadership that are achieving. She's lucky. She had more. It's a double-edged sword. The reality is she didn't. I think what Maddie did is she tried to quit. She realized she can't at retreat. And she was like, I'm going to figure this out. And she did. And now it's flourishing. What is the greatest combator to people who won't give their competency? And that is to build attractive culture. Maddie built attractive culture that made people want to be released into leadership. And it's because she actually shifted a lot of what she was doing in that way. So I want to just give you that sobering thought. What is the measure of your release? In rounding up of this simple point, how many leaders have you released? How many people are further into their gifting because of you? How many people have discovered a gifting because of you? How many people are doing something that you once did because you don't have to do it yourself? Hopefully you're not in competition with any of the people in your team, but you are releasing them into what they're great at. The measure of release. Number 2 is this: force yourself to go through. Force yourself to go through the season of lack. Force yourself to go through people and not to results. Force yourself to raise people up and get things done in the vision and goals of your team through someone. rather than do it yourself. I've watched, Jack raise up Cole as a engineer, and he's done a terrible job. And I don't know if it's Jack's fault, or let's just admit it. He had to raise up Cole. You know what I mean? Actually, it's quite the opposite. I have seen Cole really be an incredible learner and just step into a different sphere of skill set. But I've also watched Jack just give him things. And yes, Jack could have done them quicker, but he gave them and let Cole learn through them. That is a great example that we all have to get to. You have to let someone MC. You got to let them do an Excel spreadsheet. You got to let them run something. You got to let them fail. You got to do these things if you're going to get there. You got to go through people. One of the biggest measures, I think, of going through is hold people to their words, not their actions.
Yeah, it's good.
And what I mean by that is this. You get a lot of people say, I want to be a leader. I want to be on the team. I want to be on staff. I want to help you. They say that. And what I watch most leaders do is go, okay, I will give you said project. And then what happens is the person drops it. And the leader almost gets offended and goes, I knew I shouldn't have given you that. I mean, or they say this, yeah, I gave them that and they just didn't do anything with it. And I often say this, did you talk to them? And they always say, no. I'm like, so you're holding them at their actions. But you're not holding them at their words. One of the things I've learned is that our words are often out of sync with our actions, but not out of sync with our desires. What I mean by that is this. My pastor called me on the first Bible college vacation, and he said, and I didn't know anything, right? Like, I'm new to this. Didn't know him either. And he's like, so Chris, vacation, what are you doing? I was like, what a great pastor, man. Checking in on me on vacation. So I remember I'm on the lounge, kick my feet up, I'm like, just hanging out, chilling, enjoying vacation. He goes, oh, really? I was like, yeah. And he's like, you want to be a youth pastor, right? I'm like, yep. Mm-hmm. He goes, right. Is there a reason you're not in the youth office? And I was like, I'll see you there tomorrow. Point made. Yeah. Hey, my words were true. I didn't realize the actions necessary to make my words come true. Maybe they didn't drop it because they don't mean what they said. Maybe they dropped it because they don't know how to live to what they said. So that person that you've written off in your team, you need to go back and you need to make sure you hold them to the measure of their words. And look, after you do that, if they go, actually, now that I know the cost of leadership, I don't want it, fine. But don't walk away from people because they didn't do it like you wanted them to. If you're gonna actually raise people, you've got to understand that their words, there's going to be a gap between their words and their actions. They've got to learn what it looks like to be a leader. They've got to learn the cost. They've got to go on the journey. Don't be an offendable leader when people don't do it right. Don't get hurt by people being bad at something. Do you know what I mean? Don't be insulted because, and please understand that the goal of leadership is to hold lines. And if you're not going back and addressing with someone, you didn't do it the way you said, or you say you want to be a pastor, but you're not showing up, like I want to say, and I just want you to please go through everyone you've ever led and given up on and just do a check. Did you do this? Because these points don't just come out of my learnings, they come out of my catch-ups with you. And I'm not saying names, but I want to know, I just want you to know this. Why? Because even when I did like our last series on kingdom politics, I'm like, hey everyone, go get some Bible verses on what you believe. And then I find, ain't no one done it. Everyone's like, Bible verses you say. When I say it week 2, week 3, when I say it in a small group, and people are like, Bible verses, that's quite a good idea. Why do I say that? Most messages people think is for the person to the left and the right. Yeah. I want you to please be able to go through this and go, these are my volunteers that didn't work. Yeah. If I really soberly think through it, did I do everything he's saying? Yeah. Or before you go, that's for someone else, because you're so blinded by the fact that you think you need more to get to more, or this doesn't apply to your job because of your job subset. What's your measure of release? I'm talking to you. Like, if you don't have it, I'm talking to you. So the measure of release is something you need to apply. Every giant that every leader has to constantly slay is irony and hypocrisy. We constantly should have our own messages preached back to us, and they do for me. Last thing I want to say, if you have a really big list of leaders that didn't work out, go back and interview them. Because the only common denominator there is your leadership. Not them. Either you're really bad at picking people, or just there might be something. And you know what I have found? Sometimes you're just 1 degree off. I know it's affronting and scary, but do it, because you're probably not as bad at it as you think you are. You might be 1 degree off. You might be, I think one of mine that was a really big 1 degree off over the years was that I thought I was really good at communicating expectations. And then I realized that there was a common theme with everyone that didn't work out for me, kept saying, I just didn't know what you wanted me to do. And I was like, and then I pinpointed through StrengthsFinder where I went wrong. And this is where I went wrong. My innate ability, if you look at my StrengthsFinder, I've got 6 influential, 2 executing, 2 strategic thinking, right? So I'm good enough to get a broad line strategy. I'm good enough to know the general direction and this is how we go about it, but I'm not super detailed in the steps. So when I would call people with vision to things that I led, I didn't have the ability to say to them, hey, this is exactly what it's going to look like. So I had to get better at that. And then I also eventually, this is another thing with your strength, is your strengths will look different. Well, better said, they will serve you different in different seasons. My strengths are very well made for the season I'm in, but they were a struggle in the season we started. So I had to get better at certain things, and the better I got at it, the better it got. And some things I never got super proficient at, but I was aware of them. So I constantly asked, have I given you enough? Do you know what you need? Is this, just interview the people, because honestly, that one thing in that year made me activate so many more people. And it was just that I didn't realize I wasn't very clear. I wasn't good with that. That wasn't a part of communication that I was good at. So go back and interview the long list of inactive leaders you have. Here's a next one I want everybody to soberly consider. Not just inactive leaders. I want you to go back and interview every disengaged leader. If you did one thing or 2 things out of this whole staffy that got you to the end of the year, is interview your inactive and your disengaged. Find out why your inactive leader and your disengaged leader are disengaged. It will do so much for you. You will realize that, hey, there's probably something there with you. And for some of you, maybe you are really good at picking the wrong person. I have had leaders that love a wild card. Their whole group is a group of wild cards, and they've got gifting, it's apparent. They've got potential, it's apparent, but they're so far from being healthy. And for some reason, they're just a band of wild cards, man. They're I love it. And I think that does happen. But either way, there will be really great, love that. Great data there for you on that. Okay. Sound like one of my little kids. Okay, third is this. Gather and build. Gather and build. What I mean by that is simply this. Leaders are built, and I think you've got to gather them, and then you've got to start looking at which aspects of their life need to be built. Leadership is a holistic thing, and sometimes the person is failing not because of leadership skills that are present in the way they lead teams, but present in the way they lead themselves. The weight of their bills at home can often outweigh their potential in the team. So sometimes you got to lead someone there. Other people are brilliant everywhere, and for some reason, this is just human nature, it doesn't cross over everywhere. So maybe they make really bad romantic decisions, and they keep getting caught up on that. You know what I mean? Or their romantic focus is the thing that gets them. There is things that happen. So I wanted to say that when you build someone, you build the whole person. You can't just build the functional person, because someone can be actually really functional for you and very dysfunctional at home. Yeah. And in the leadership that we do, it'll be a disqualifier. So I want you to consider that building someone for a role is about building the person. There's some people that need to learn tenacity. There's some people that need to learn to actually not hate themselves. That sounds crazy, but more often than not, I find that I lead people that cannot say a nice thing about themselves and can tell you everything they need to do different. Being overly emotional, that's a thing. Like, you got to build the person. And when you build the person, you're building the framework and the foundation that leadership sits on. So when you bring someone in, if the only feedback you feel to give them is going to be on how they gave our Bibles on Sunday, I think you're going to find that there's going to be a lack of what you can do. And I think this is where discipleship becomes the greatest framework for good leaders. This is where filled with the Holy Spirit, with a good reputation, becomes so key in developing a leader. So at the end of the day, I want to encourage you, the best way to do that is, I said, the word was actually gather. The reason I chose the word gather was that proximity is key. You cannot lead someone that you are not within proximity to be offering them leadership. It is absolutely imperative. Why? More is caught than it is taught. And if your only goal of leadership is a team meeting once a month or once a week, I promise you, you will lack leaders and you will have an abundance of frustration. Because you will be able to, you'll never close the gap between what you said and what they carry. It's actually the people that do dinner with you. It's the people that you go to lunch with. It's the people that, and for those of you that are single, those of you with small teams, just know that some of your best work could be done right now. Because you've got more time, more focus. There's not a million leaders asking for your time. There's few leaders asking for your time. So I want to encourage you, set up the soil for growth, and that is proximity. Get good at taking leaders with you. Get them in on the things that you love. Do more dinners, do more lunches. And that means this, not every lunch has an agenda, but every lunch has a purpose. So you might not even have something to address. It doesn't mean that you just always chill. You might find something, but build the person. Build the person and you'll build their ability to lead. The last thing is growth is served daily. Leadership growth is served daily. That means you serve people. Leadership is an act of service far more than you realize. Why? Because leadership requires patience and process. And patience and process is something that a leader has to serve someone through. You have to serve them as you listen to their heartache and their pain and you get them through somewhere. You have to serve them as you are a friend to their destiny, not to their comfort. You have to serve them as you actually slow down to get them along the journey. Why? Because the goal of any leader should be the first thing, your measure of release. And to release people means you got to serve them, man. You got to serve them with helping them learn how to read their Bible. You got to serve them through putting them first. You got to serve them by taking countless hours out of your day. You got to serve them by helping them break through in subjects that you would not have patience for. You got to serve people. And I think as you serve people and you show servanthood, that's where people start to grow. And I think, we all need people to help us get to where we got to go. And one of the greatest things that has helped Audrey and I was also one of our greatest pain points. And it was this: we have had people serve us and our family, and it has been one of the greatest gifts. They've helped us by releasing us to go to growth track because we know our kids are with someone. We've had people like Sandra Jones has served us so well by cooking us dinners for like a year and a half now, I think, or 2 years on a Wednesday night because it's our busiest night. And it is so beautiful. And what it does is it releases, but there was a season that we rejected it. And what we did is we would serve but not want to be served. And the reason we did that is because we saw leaders take advantage of it, where the goal was to be served and not serve. And what we realized is we had it out of whack and we were stealing and robbing people's opportunity to serve. We were also stealing and robbing our opportunity to run further in this thing as we serve each other. And what we found is we were comfortable with modeling it but not comfortable with receiving it, and therefore there was a problem that was going to inherently show up in the servanthood of our church. And so we felt challenged to correct that in us. And then we felt challenged to ask ourselves, what's the best way we serve people in every different season? In some seasons, it was teaching people the basics of doing relationship or cooking or, you know what I mean? And other seasons, it was like, I best serve people by doing what the apostles said, which is devoting themselves to prayer and teaching of the word. But the goal is always serving people. And if the goal is to build an army that will serve you, then you're never going to build leaders. But if you can actually serve people, if you do small things like help when you're available and all those different things, like I think it goes a long way. And I think you've got to understand that developing a leader is an act of service. It is, you're trying to serve as someone that can help them become who they need to become. And sometimes you're serving up truth. Sometimes you're serving up compassion. Sometimes and most times you're serving up example, but you're still serving. And that requires patience and process, which is the absolute opposite of the old adage, if you want it done right, you do it yourself. You got to be patient to let someone fail because leadership is a process. If you do that, you'll develop leaders. And the people that do it, develop great leaders. And I would say for all of us, that is our goal. Let's not get stuck doing stuff and working ourselves into a perpetual job, but releasing people into their calling. Think of this last thought. Everything you do as a leader that you don't need to do is someone else's opportunity and someone else's calling that you're standing in the way blocking. So maybe you're carrying things because you think you have to, and really you're limiting people from being released under your leadership. That's my thought for today's Staffy. That's what I want to see grow in 2025 in our church, across all campuses, teams, and departments.